Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 1 week from Thanksgiving, and possibly some snow today. So glad to see, glad to see some
On
rain.
grass surfaces only.
Happy to see some rain to help us with some of the brush fires. So we're looking forward tonight to hearing a report on technology, and thank you to Jeff Sun and Chris Nelson for joining us. But before we begin, can someone please make a motion to return to public session? Motion by Lorraine, seconded by Bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
7-0. And before we begin, can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. And as I said, tonight we're looking forward to a presentation on technology. I did just want to point out that when we have our presentations, we've changed our format a little bit to have our presenters join us at a round table. And so their backs will be to the public, but we're not intending to be rude or disrespectful, but it really helps us to have more of a conversation with our presenters when we sit in this fashion. So, we want our meetings to be in public. It's required by public meeting law, but we're still trying to work together through our meeting. And just for those of you who are here for public forum, we will have board announcements and a report from our student board member, our presentation, and then we'll turn to public forum. So we thank you for being here and have an opportunity to see the presentation that we see, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak after that. And with that, are there any board announcements? If I could begin, I just wanted to congratulate the high school students who were in theater who had the play over the weekend. I was able to go Saturday night.
It was great.
It was really nice to have the, I don't know what you call like kind of the close seating or smaller theater. The small stage that they created was really wonderful and made it like, it felt like sort of an off-Broadway show. It was really nice. And the play was terrific, and congratulations to them, and thank you to our administrators who support them in that work. There was really just a lot of great talent there and lots of teamwork. You could see the kids really work together. So congratulations to them, and thank you to all who made that possible.
Yeah, I'll second that. The play was wonderful, and I also wanted to congratulate our girls volleyball team. It was just 2 weeks ago tonight that they made it to the county center for their next round of play, and I know a few of us had the opportunity to be there and cheer them on, and truly they were speaking their own language of volleyball, and it was such a joy to behold. It really was, and really just couldn't have felt more proud of the girls and of their coaches, and it was just beautiful teamwork and a wonderful testament to their sportsmanship and their talent and their dominance, and they were great. And I know then they've gone on to play one more time. I understand their season has ended. I was there for that, or that game, I should say, as well, that match. Several of us had the opportunity, and what a beautiful season. And congratulations to all of them. Very proud of them.
And what a season for Tom Rosati to go out on.
Absolutely.
It did 22 years of dedicating endless hours. Our coaches put in more time than parents and administration and us. We understand, like, they're breaking down film, they're working with the kids, they're making sure that our kids are mentally and physically prepared. So, it's amazing what they do with our students.
Very happy for him. It was a lovely, lovely capstone to his career as a coach.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And I think also with the play, we had our great art show. So, that's always fun to see as well. That was also very well laid out, and there's hours that go into that as well.
Beautiful art. Congratulations to the art students too.
Yep. And when we also had an opportunity to go to the Tilly Foster Farms dinner and to hear some discussions about foundation aid, and I guess will be more to come on that as we find out what the state's going to do this year, but it's always a very nice dinner, beautiful location, and just some really it's a good chance to connect with some of our other board members across the region, and just learn from some people that are doing the work.
Thank you. I had forgotten about that, and
It seems like a lifetime ago.
Tona Lewisboro was very well represented. So thank you for that. And it was a really important conversation with Michael regarding Foundation Aid, and I'm glad that several of us had the chance to hear from him, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. Thank you for remembering that.
Great. Ian, would you like to give your report?
Sure. So this past month has proved to be pretty eventful, with our schools contributing to democracy and becoming voting centers on Election Day, Veterans Day being celebrated, and our vets being honored around our schools, and the approval of block scheduling for our next school year at the last meeting. This month and the coming one looks to be a lot more tame, with both Thanksgiving and winter recess being just around the corner. Starting with Meadow Pond, they've had their PTO book fair on the 7th and 8th of November and the 12th and 14th of November, with parent-teacher conferences coming up on the 14th and 18th of November, and a community meeting and Spirit Day on the 27th of November. Increase Miller recently celebrated Native American Heritage Month with a visiting from the Red Hawk Native American Arts Council, who gave students a taste of Native American culture by showing them a variety of cultural dances, authentic clothing pieces, and giving them an opportunity to have a Q&A. As with last month's celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, we appreciate the effort that Increase Miller puts into educating students on the diverse groups in their community. They've had their parent-teacher conferences on the 7th, 14th, and 18th, with a 5th grade bingo game on the 14th as well, and they're having their pre-K panel yesterday for pre-K parents who are looking to learn more about our schools. Katona has had their parent-teacher conferences on the 7th, 14th, and 18th. Their holiday gift drive begins on the 2nd of December, and December 20th, they'll be having their 5th grade students versus faculty volleyball game. In terms of the middle school, the students have been enjoying their new playground, complete with a swing and rotating climber, as well as the renovated theater entrance every day on the way in and out of school. To build more community across their grades, students in their home bases work together to create, design, and ultimately present their own monster doors to the entire school. November 8th, their Veterans Day assembly had students honor those who fought to protect the freedoms that they enjoy today, with students getting to walk their family members who served down to receive their recognition. And starting today through the 23rd, they'll be having their fall drama and their fall production of Alice in Wonderland. Moving on to the high school, October 25th saw the Best Buddies chapters at John Jay and Fox Lane come together and have the first annual Buddy Bowl, a football game dedicated to the mission of the Best Buddies Club, where our very own Ellie Pernick opened the game with a coin toss. November 7th had our annual Field of Honor, our celebration and recognition of Veterans Day, where the John Jay for Vets Club organized and honored the veterans in our community and thanked them for their service with both speeches and music from various members in our community. November 13th, students celebrated their Letter of Intent signing ceremony, in which students who plan to continue their varsity sports careers in high school signed letters of intent, surrounded by the students who supported them. Our high school production of The Dining Room went from the 16th to the 14th of November. As many of you said, it was a great show. I saw it and personally enjoyed it a lot. Our art show also opened on the 14th, again, very well put together, with many students being able to show off the fruits of their labor and ultimately receive the recognition for the hard work that they've been putting in for these past few months. Our Thanksgiving week starts next week, with the Spirit Day themes being Flannel Day, Class Color Day, and Cozy Clothes Day. And the 11th and 12th, we'll be having our freshman play, a production of The Cards of Fate. Lastly, for student government and other committees throughout our district, Lee John Jay is going to have their next leadership conference on the 2nd, in which we'll plan our annual Unity Day for high schoolers and check in with our freshman class to both build community and make sure everyone's doing okay. Campus Congress recently had a visiting session with Dr. Blanche to create and establish our goals to develop our community further, as well as creating plans to realize those goals, whether it be through this year or through the next years after that. Our Equity and Racial Justice Committee will be meeting December 10th, and the Effective Use of Time Committee met November 18th, just this Monday, and are currently working on a frequently asked questions, as well as other ways to get information out to our parents, teachers, and students about the effects and details regarding block scheduling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. That was a great summary and great to hear all the things that are happening in November. We really appreciate that update. Do you mind if I put you on the spot and ask you a question? How do you think students are feeling about block scheduling? I know you discussed it at Campus Congress. What's
Yeah.
your sense of student engagement in the process?
So I think in general, students are definitely a little apprehensive about the big change. The main concerns are surrounding 80 minutes of classes they're not exactly fond of, but I think our plans to rework the pedagogy will definitely offset those complaints and hopefully lead to a lot more engaging classes. Another complaint is the fact that the max classes they can take will move down from 9 to 8. I think a lot of the concern comes from the effect that'll have on college admissions, but ultimately colleges tend to look at things holistically, and the fact that we'll only offer 8 classes as a max instead of 9 will ultimately offset that, I guess, fear of worse college admissions chances. Aside from that, I know a lot of other students are excited about it. Personally, my grade is a little detached seeing that we won't be there, but even then, I think a lot of other students who will ultimately go through block scheduling are also excited for just a change, honestly, to experience something new and hopefully have more engaging experiences in the classroom.
Great, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
And I think too, so I was also at that meeting, I've been on that committee. I think they've got some exciting webinars and interactions planned for the community to really learn more about that. So that'll be good to help allay some fears and some concerns and questions about that. I think it's a pretty well laid out plan that they've been talking about. So I think it'll be good. And, thank you for your contributions. I always love interacting with you at those meetings.
Thanks.
And so we're going to move on to our item 8.01, which is our presentation on technology. And Chris Nelson and Jeff Sun are going to join us.
Switch the name tags.
I'll go ahead and start board, and as these gentlemen go ahead and get themselves situated. So we're going to go ahead tonight, and Jeff and Chris will walk us through a little bit here with the kind of digital learning program review that took place last year. We'll go through that at a high-level view, some of the process that was involved, some of the questions that were involved, some of the learning points that were coming forth of that, and then kind of where we will go next steps. And we'll be talking a little bit about how we've gotten an update since this has actually taken place. And Chris will speak to us a little bit about the timeline has changed from the state as far as their our next technology plan that goes to the state, and then also how opportunities will be able to hopefully be embedded into some of the KLSD 2030 work. So you'll kind of see that coming forward. So I'll hand it off to you, Chris. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you to the full board here. It's always a privilege to come up and kind of talk about technology. It's a big investment. I think it impacts a lot of the work that we do on campus. So having these conversations, I think, are important. In my tenure in the district, I've had an opportunity to go through several technology plans. And I don't know if the full board understands that this is a requirement by the state. The state, as part of their state funding formulas and such, require us to document and set goals in terms of how we anticipate using those funds. So every 3 years, we go through a cycle of producing, some expectations from the state, at the same time having some local input in terms of things that we'd like to see the technology do for our learners and in our learning environments. So when I first started in the district, I inherited one of the plans. So I came in kind of closing out a technology plan that was focused on smart bond monies. Those of you that were here long enough to understand that the state was trying to up the ante in terms of bandwidth and Wi-Fi and infrastructure for schools. That was a very heavy emphasis on infrastructure. And that was something that I think when I came in, we really tackled a big project. We had a lot of campus growing pains to be able to get our network to where it needed to be, but we got there. And I think that was a great commitment, both by the technology team and the investments that we made. Fast forward to the next plan that we developed, it was a process to look at the classroom environment. We received a lot of feedback from our teachers and some thoughtful design in terms of what a learning environment might consist of, and can we shift from a one computer classroom to one that is more mobile? Our faculty gave us a lot of input in terms of where they worked and how they worked and where technology could fit in their professional lives. And that was the first introduction of laptops for our teachers, and that was a big shift and quite successful in terms of asking folks to take their laptops away. Now I think we'd have a different impression than asking them to first make that shift. And then, of course, I have to speak to the fact that the pandemic hit us, mostly because of the fact that that plan was pretty much written for us. We had to respond to a remote environment, which accelerated a plan to the state, which required us to kind of demonstrate how we could be remote, at the same time re-enter the learning spaces in such a way that gave us flexibility and hybrid models, and using the technology in such a way that we could distance and be able to respond to any other emergencies in terms of responding to the whole pandemic was very interesting for us from a technology lens. But we survived it, and that gave us a great understanding in terms of how students could exist in a one-to-one program. It probably wasn't as thoughtful as our earlier plans because it was more reactive than it was proactive. But we spent the last few years understanding those impacts, and now we're at a point the state is asking us to do the next round of technology planning. So last year, in anticipation of that, we worked through a process with the District Technology Committee to do some research. We broke into different committees. We had different themes for each of our meetings. It gave us an opportunity to look at trends, an opportunity to kind of anticipate what the next 3 years could be for us. When you take a look at topics like AI or augmented reality and all the different ways of using the technology, we had to educate ourselves in that capacity. And then we also wanted to kind of get an outside perspective in terms of how well are we really doing with the technology integration components of the technology. And that's something that, it's obviously we could ask, from my perspective, how we're doing. Perhaps there's some bias and pride in terms of what we're doing. So historically, we've asked outside people that can come in and give a lens, and then that's where Jeff's work comes in terms of asking him to kind of just come in as an outside perspective, kind of take a snapshot of where we are, and provide us a base of understanding in terms of where our users might provide some feedback, giving us maybe some recommendations in terms of starting a foundation to do the planning process. And I think at first thought when we brought Jeff in last spring was that we would be doing that good work this year in terms of the planning process, but most of the districts throughout across the state had kind of said, well, we kind of paused after the pandemic. We weren't really focused on technology because we wanted to reset the norms just to get our students back into the classroom, that the state provided us an extension, an extra year to kind of think about it. So although we were ready to move forward with planning this year, we're just continuing the conversation and continuing to work with our stakeholders to understand where we are. So we want to honor Jeff's work. I think he's got a lot of insight in terms of what he's been able to collect for us in terms of an outside perspective of our technology use. But please understand that this is one of many conversations that we'll take back to the technology planning when we start that process next year. So
Okay.
Jeff, welcome. Hopefully, good introduction.
Yep, great, thanks, Chris. One other thing that I'll add, just sort of to building off of what Chris was saying, and it helps to put a little context into this, is the technology planning process, which will essentially be restarting again next year. This time around, so the plan that you're currently in actually had slightly different requirements from NYSED. And I can speak to that sort of thing because, in fact, actually, my firm has worked with districts here in New York for a long time. We do a lot of work with your RIC, or the Regional Information Center, Lower Hudson Regional Information Center in this case, and actually did training for about 25 districts in southern Westchester. I'll get lost on the time track here, but it was as people were putting together the current plan. My point of all of that is that NYSED was actually asking for evaluation in the current planning process, which is actually something that they've not done before. And I think it's a good step forward for the state to actually encourage districts to come up with ways to measure their progress and to do the kind of work that, very fortunately, Katana-Lewisboro's kind of stepped up to the plate and did, even without the plan or the state actually demanding it. So, I think, I don't think anybody feels it this way, but you didn't lose any ground by doing something when you did it. In fact, actually, you probably did more work than you needed to, but it was the work that you should have been doing anyway. So that's a good thing.
Thank you.
So I have a series of slides, which I will kind of move through as efficiently as possible, trying not to spend a whole lot of time looking at slides so that we can actually have a conversation about some of this stuff. So just to get started, Jeff Sun Associates, I told you a little bit about our background already. I think that some of the board probably knows the background also. Our stock and trade is program evaluation. So we in fact actually don't only work with digital learning and instructional technology, but we do program evaluation and educational program evaluation only in a broader sense. We're interested in technology. We've developed quite an expertise in technology, but it's really technology as a tool. So that's what positions us to look at what's going on in the classroom. We can say a little bit to Chris and to the district about the technology part itself, the infrastructure and those kinds of things, but that's not really our expertise, and that's not really what the district brought us in to do. This turns out actually to be our 5th engagement with Katona-Lewisboro, something which I just bring up because I think it's cool. We've worked with you from 2000. So we've been here and I've been in this room and in this building, and actually was in this building before you enclosed things as much as they're enclosed right now. So we were in the open plan version of this building, I believe. But we were here 2000, 2003, 2004, 2005, and then just this past year. So and I've already talked a little bit about the relationship with Lyric. The goal that this whole project is organized around, which was really articulated by Chris, was, as it says here on the slide, to develop a snapshot of digital learning and technology within the district, and operating down to the classroom level to see what it is that's happening in classrooms and buildings throughout the district. The emphasis being on snapshot, because as Chris noted, this was a project that actually we originally started this work, planning it, back in February of last year. So it's actually almost been a year at this point. And we came into the district to do our data collection right at the end of the spring semester last year. So that's what that snapshot is a snapshot of. We realized that school districts are static or rigidly fixed according to, we're going to do this and this is what we do and this is all that we're going to do. Things change and things are flexible and dynamic as they move along. So, that's the grain of salt that you probably want to take some of this with, because I'm sure that a lot of things have happened since we were here doing this initially. So an evaluation is going to be built around evaluation questions, and there were 4 evaluation questions that drove this evaluation. We were looking at the basically what are teachers and students doing in the classroom vis-a-vis integration. Once again, this was really about how technology was supporting teaching and learning, and it wasn't so much about what kind of computers people had or their network access or the degree to which they use Microsoft tools or whatever the case may be. But whatever it is that they were doing, we were interested in taking that snapshot of how technology was working in the classroom. The other big piece, and that's something that we do in all of our projects, and there's been dozens of these projects throughout the years, but that's sort of the core thing, that first question right there. The other one, though, is about the value and the values that the learning community, and that includes parents and caregivers, as well as the teachers, as well as the administrators, as well as, of course, the students, the values that they have with regard to the impact that technology has on teaching and learning. So as a practical matter, what that really kind of gets into is it helps explain what it is that's happening in the classroom. Okay, so once again, that infrastructure piece may come into play a little bit in terms of if there's, are terrible infrastructure issues or no computers or something like that. Obviously, none of those things are issues here in Katona-Lewisboro. What actually happens in the classroom has a lot to do with the value that the community places upon technology. So we're looking at that. The third one is the extent to which the technology is adequately supported and maintained. That gets a little bit back into the infrastructure piece. But the supported part, a lot of that is around professional development. Because you can want to use technology as much as anyone. You can believe that it's an important thing for student learning or for human development. But if you don't have the professional development that actually supports you in being able to do this stuff, and not just how to turn the computer on or how to get into some app or some program, but really, it's interesting, you talk about block scheduling and you talked about the changes in pedagogy, all right? So that is going to all be about, is going to have a lot to do with your use of technology, okay? What are those changes in pedagogy that you're thinking about? We could talk about that for the next 3 days, but a lot of that's going to have to do with to how technology is integrated and what constitutes digital learning and how digital learning is being used here within the district. That's the reality of where we are in history. So that's something that's going to have to happen, and that you're going to have training about that, okay? And training that's around integration. And the last question is, was really one that as Chris put it, he wanted to hear about the wins. He wanted to hear what's out there that's happening right now, that people are feeling good about, that seems to be working, that is notable, that can ultimately, be highlighted, help frame professional development, feed into the planning process, do more stuff like that. Well, what's stuff like that? All right, so we wanted to hear about those wins. So those are the core questions. I think this next slide we don't have to spend much time with. It's the schematic process of how we do this. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not really rocket science. The part here that I would say, or just draw your attention to, is that very first piece, which is about developing indicators. In a traditional program evaluation, you need to have performance indicators, okay? Usually our methodology of evaluation, or our methodology, is all built around collaborative participatory evaluation. We do not believe in coming in and sort of being the people who say, oh, okay, good, not good. There are people who do that. We don't do that. That's more along the line with the audit process, which is why we never refer to what we do as auditing, even though a lot of times people think that it is auditing. It is a collaborative participatory evaluation, which ideally, and this can feed into your planning process, I think, as you look forward to planning, can feed into the community developing an understanding and a set of indicators for what it is that the district ought to be accomplishing vis-a-vis digital learning. In this case, we didn't do that piece so much, but we actually used a research-based framework to take a look at the practices that we saw. And that's all detailed in the report. We don't need to go too deep into that right now, but that gets into things like ISTE standards, NET standards, and SAMR, and those kinds of things. Data, real quick. We did observations in classrooms in all 5-year schools. We were in every classroom, talked to just about every teacher. We actually recorded 120 observations. We interviewed all the principals as well as the associate principals in most cases. We had 78 focus group participants that included in different kinds of groups, students, teachers, administrative staff, parents and caregivers. And we also did online surveys. Many of you have probably, and people listening out there in the Zoom world, probably actually did some of those surveys. We had 667 responses, fabulous response in terms of surveys. Like I said, we've been doing this all over the place and for years, and we do not often get those kinds of survey responses. So that's an indicator, if nothing else, of the engagement of your community, okay, which is I will try not to just kind of keep coming back and saying the same positive things over and over again. But you really do need to know that your community is very engaged with what it is that you're trying to do. So, and that's very positive, because I work in a number of districts where the community can't be bothered. okay? Or the community can't be bothered around this particular topic. You've got if nothing else, the resources that demonstrate that the community is engaged here. So, moving on, what did we find? Once again, the main thing that we found is that digital learning technologies are being used broadly and widely throughout all of your schools. That is extraordinarily positive as well.
Sorry, can I have a question?
Yeah,
That's okay.
sure.
So I know that the pandemic kind of forced us to have each student have technology in their hands on a daily basis to do school from remote positions. But you also often now are hearing in the news about students having too much screen time, and they always have their phone in their hands. They're so in tune to social media, which may not be so good for their mental health. Can you give your thoughts on how much we're using technology in the classrooms as a beneficial way, with also still giving time for non-screen time?
Sure. And actually, if you let me go ahead and build here, we're going to get to that, because that's obviously an important issue as well. So what is it that this bullet here is saying? That they're making use of the technology for information acquisition, analysis, and a way to demonstrate their learning. Okay, so those are if we were to, and the full report does this, provide a lot of examples of literally the kinds of things that people are doing. All right, but to get to your point, or start to get to your point, one thing that we found that is not as positive as those first two bullets is that there's relatively little uniformity from class to class as to how teachers guide and implement that technology. So another way of putting that is teachers, and I don't mean this to be a negative on the part of teachers, because I will say this now and I'll say it again later on, I tie all of this back to training and professional development and guidance. But there is a term I use a little bit later on, is the amount of intentionality around the use of technology varies from classroom to classroom and teacher to teacher. And that gets at this point that you're raising, okay? Which is that it's one thing, it's great that students have access to these devices. And frankly, the fact that they have, it's a one-on-one environment. We could bat that around for a while as to whether that's positive or not positive. But literally, I'm telling you that that's the way it is. Okay, students have access to those devices, and every district is trying to get to one-to-one if they're not in one-to-one right now. The pandemic booted pretty much everybody over into that place.
Yeah, and I think we're in an interesting time with technology, right? So it's the technical challenges, the acquisition and having a working inventory, being able to have the supports to build consistency and continuity with the technology. I think we're there. We don't hear the barriers, and that was something that we couldn't have these conversations until we could establish at least consistency and continuity there. So we very rarely are down with our network. In fact, I can't speak to a time that we've been down in the last 2 years. I can't speak to folks that haven't had the technology when they need it and where they need it, and we have the resources to do that. So now as we look at the next planning piece is how can we define use? And that's something that from a professional lens, the intentionality, how do we plan, how do we look at our lessons and find fits of technology use to support their learning. But then also a kind of a parallel track is that how do we build proficiency and fluency with the technology if we're not consistently interacting with the technology. So if our goal is to build skills, if our goal is to be able to have a choice in terms of creating different ways to communicate and develop products that are there, we have to have a continuum of practice in such a way that kids have opportunity, which I think we have opportunity now, but defining use in such a way that we can ensure that's there. And so some of the inconsistencies, and Jeff can probably expand on this, is that if you have a highly engaged environment with a fourth grade classroom, they may be relying on a third grade classroom to build foundational skills so that they can accelerate the opportunity for kids to do that. We've seen now this one-to-one program in place for 4 years now. We're actually entering our 5th year. And so our 7th graders, for example, for 5 years have been using the tablets, and their proficiency is so much greater than when we first introduced the 7th graders devices, because we didn't have that fluency with the devices. And what we're seeing from that are much different sets of products that are being created with it. You go to a library now, and we have a whole podcasting lab, and we got a long list of folks that want to go in and create, with their GarageBand, opportunities to kind of use their voices and advocate for their learning and debate and all the things that go along with it. It's hard not to do that without the modern tools. Because that's what kids are listening to. Those are things that the kids want to create because that's the world that they're in. And we want to be able to help them, find that balance in terms of doing that. So I think that's these moments where we're talking about it. I think we may not have answers for them right away, but part of the planning process is if that's our goal and at the end of the next technology plan, can we have a better understanding of the use of the technology in such a way that we can have the outcomes that we're looking for? I'm excited, with Ray's work in terms of the strategic plan. We're changing, the structures in terms of time in the classroom, and we go back to block scheduling provides a whole different format in terms of being able to leverage the tools. Curriculum mapping process in terms of really understanding our outcomes and goals with the curriculum, and then with that, might we have a column that has the resources that support that? And some of them will be digital, and some of them may be more traditional in that sense. But at least we'll have those opportunities to have those conversations in such a way that it's structured and viable, because now we're talking about it and we have those things in place. So I don't want to detract from the presentation, but in the same regards, I just wanted to. I hope that puts a little more context into it.
Yeah, and are we still supporting the families in our district that need, boosters and internet access? I know that we were doing some of that during the pandemic.
And we do our best. Some of those are community, and not anyone in the community, but just the geography, if you will.
Right.
I'd say even with the best cell phone, you can't get connections when you take the left turn outside of Increase Miller, right? So it's we could give all the boosters in the world, you're not going to get internet service there. So we do have some challenges there, but we have some great relationships with our vendors, and we've helped a lot of families in that capacity. The state still has some funding that is provided to the telecom companies to be able to do that. So I can't say we've had a perfect solution for every family, but we do the best we can to support them.
Great, thank you.
A lot to unpack there, and this is to me the fascinating thing about this work is that it ties into so many things, and there's no simple answers. There's no technology good, technology bad, but it really is all about what how you use it, how you're trained, what the framework is within which you're putting it. One of the things that Chris said is he made the analogy to tool, and I think the way that I understand and my belief with regard to what digital learning is and these tools that we have, and this goes I think directly to the should kids at whatever age be using these things, is, and how much screen time should they have, is that technology actually represents several tools, but categorically it is a tool that is in a learner's toolbox, okay? It's not the only tool, all right? And there's a lot of things in there that are not a computer or a website or some sort of interactive media or something like that. But just as, back home in your toolbox, you can't do everything with a screwdriver. I mean, believe me, I see people do it. I see people try to drive screws. I see people take a screwdriver and hold on to the metal side and use the plastic side and try to bang nails. I see people use screwdrivers trying to scrape the caulking out of windows. It generally doesn't work out very well when you do that. All right, so you need to understand that you've got screwdrivers, you've got hammers, you've got all sorts of things, you've got power tools, and those are all appropriate in their own way. And it is the role of the teacher building, as Chris is referring to, something that we talk about in our report and talk about in this work, building a continuum of skills so that ultimately by the time students get to this building, they have developed the understandings that say, okay, this is when I actually want to take that computer and do something with it. But, there's other situations where to put that thing away, okay? Because now it's time to actually have, IRL conversations with people in, my classroom or my teachers or whatever, okay? you can't expect second graders necessarily to figure that out. Yeah, they all know how to sit there and do this, but they don't necessarily have the judgment to be able to know that there's a hammer in the toolbox as well as the screwdriver / phone, okay, or iPad or whatever it is that you're giving them. The teachers need to have that kind of skill. The teachers need to be supported to develop the sort of frameworks that can guides the development of student skills so that students can grow those things over time. And basically what we found, and I'm not sure where this connects to the bullet points, but who cares? The real point here is that teachers in Katona-Lewisboro don't have that, we call it a scope and sequence. They don't know what it is that students at any one point in time ought to be able to do. They don't necessarily have any guidance around, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, okay? And some teachers, therefore, develop their own guidance, develop their own concept of what it is that they want to do. Some teachers decide that they don't want to do any of this, and, if nobody's going to make us do it, then we'll let it decide, and we'll do something else. That may work just as well, but may not be necessarily beneficial for those students, because those students are not going to be with that teacher for more than a year. And they're going to go off to another teacher next year, and that teacher is going to have students from multiple other teachers that fed into his or her grade, and doesn't have any idea what those students can or cannot do. So you see how there's, without the scope and sequence and without the guidance to teachers around how that scope and sequence should be implemented, you develop a more and more chaotic spiral upward, okay, or downward in some
Jeff,
cases.
you're speaking to technology, right? The kids' ability to learn different aspects of technology.
Well, not just, there's very few children that actually need to be taught how to use technology.
So
Okay,
what are you
but
referring to?
I'm referring to how they use it as a tool for learning. Okay, this is not about whether they know how to turn the phone on or to get into an app or something like that. They all know how to do that. They know how to do that nowadays before they ever even show up in one of your elementary schools, because it's almost a thing that they do from birth at this point. But what they don't know is how to make the decisions about when it is appropriate to actually be on it, how to interact appropriately with information, other people, the devices themselves sometimes.
Digital citizenship,
yeah.
safety, security.
We can all go to websites, but we don't necessarily know how to evaluate whether the stuff that we're seeing on that website is useful, not useful, harmful, not harmful. That's digital citizenship, as Julie's referring to. And that's something that has to be taught. So
There's
that's
two
what we're
different
talking
things. So to me, we could have a course across K through 12 that engages at the right moment in time in various aspects of digital citizenship and security and so on. We could teach
Well, and the
that.
state released those standards last year.
You have
Oh,
to
And
right.
we've
So that's-
started
so-
to,
So those are accounted for already in our curriculum. Sure.
They've been identified by the state, but we have not. We don't have a viable curriculum around it yet.
I see.
no,
So what
we've
you're
made
suggesting isn't-
plans, but
Yeah,
not.
right, yes.
So it's not about the use of technology and it's about
Yeah.
learning about
It's
how
about
to
integration.
interact and integrate with technology. I get you. Now I'm with you.
Right.
And so one of the pieces that, again, as Jeff was here last time in the district, that the team is already working on is our kind of our system, our structure of professional learning communities. And this is one of the key pieces, and even in Jeff's report, he'll speak to the idea about laying in these new standards into the curriculum mapping process. And that's a piece that Chris is involved in, our teachers will be involved in, Julia will be leading that from the team there. That's the embedded part that Jeff was speaking about. And then a little bit about the usage of that technology, the idea about lower order or higher order thinking skills. And that's a piece that I think Jeff is speaking about, is when I have technology in here, am I doing some pretty basic skill components, or am I really applying that information? Am I creating some synthesis? Am I looking at doing some research? So that's a part we are prepared and ready when we get to that point to do our own internal kind of check and monitoring in a way as we're visiting each other's classrooms and saying, not so much looking about what the instructor is doing, but what are the students doing? Are the students engaged at that level that we would desire them to be at a percentage we want? We're always going to have a blend in there, but we don't want to be too heavy in a lower order thinking skills. We want to make sure more of a higher order thinking skills at a higher level percentage of the time. And again, Jeff mentioned about the block schedule. That will provide opportunity in there, and we want to make sure that when technology is determined to be the tool to use, it is mostly appropriately used for students who are engaging in higher order thinking skills. Again, that kind of Bloom's taxonomy thing about application and the synthesis. And that's a piece that will be prepared and ready to do that once we get those standards and learning expertise laid into the system to monitor.
And that makes perfect sense to me. I just felt like we're coming at a curriculum problem from a technology perspective, which is fine, but really, these are curriculum questions that we're talking about here.
Oh, absolutely.
And leverage technology as part of the curriculum. These are not really technology issues, these are curriculum issues, and how do we build a curriculum correctly to address these issues?
And I can't say much, Jeff, when you started again, just being new to the team, that without the infrastructure, without the capacity that's there, without those resources, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation right now. So we're at a place where we're able to have a really rich conversation to move it forward. So sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, no, that I agree with all of that. You've got the infrastructure. None of this is about the infrastructure. But it is really all about I shorthanded to say integration, but I, go directly to what Ray's saying about higher order thinking skills and Bloom's taxonomy and such. And we have an entire chapter that lays out the theoretical underpinnings for this in the full report itself. But that establishes the why, okay? The what, you've got the what. And most people, like I said, even without spending any time doing professional development, children, they've got the what. We use it because we like watching the videos. We've got it because we like going to websites. We've got it because we use it to talk to other people. But why? And how do you channel that so that it becomes constructive in terms of supporting true learning? That is an issue that starts with vision, works to policy, has to be implemented through professional development, and the PLCs that you're talking about is an aspect of that. But ultimately then comes down to the level of curriculum, as you're saying. There needs to be work actually mapping this stuff to the curriculum.
I do want to talk about that for a second, though, to clarify a little bit. The computer science and digital fluency standards that were released were deliberately turnkeyed to teachers and staff and do have kind of their own standards, separate and apart from our traditional learning standards. So one part of the things that we developed in conjunction with Mike Sammartano, one of our former instructional coaches, was like a scope and sequence of activities that the technology TAs throughout the district this year are imparting in all of the buildings. So I don't want to make it seem like that hasn't been happening or is separate from our efforts. It's a joint.
Yeah, I get it.
It's a shift that we're just starting the journey. And I think that's the piece that this plan will help us understand where we're going on that journey. And so we have the foundation, that we have the right people in place. We have the structures that Ray is introducing to our faculty to be able to understand it. But I think what Jeff's work is asking us to continue to think about is how do we define once we get there? And so what does it mean to be technology literate as a middle school student? What does it mean to be technology literate as a high school student? And if we can be clear in those expectations, I think it provides more confidence for our faculty to know that they're using the technology properly. And then we can put up the right safeguards in place and say, you've deviated from this in such a way that we can have conversations with kids to refocus them. And so that's where I think when we talk about just giving someone a device, and at home maybe it's a cell phone, and in the classroom it might be a tablet, if we can't define our expectations for it, that's where the children will fill the gaps with social curiosity. And that's what that kind of takes them into an abyss. And that's what, is stressing the adults out, because we know they can be productive tools, and we know that there's so many other skills they need to develop in order to balance the life that they should be having as young adolescents. But the tools are still part of their life, and we, I think, have a responsibility to define that for them and provide them opportunities to both practice that and make mistakes in such a way that we can refocus them to understand the true purpose of a lot of these tools, because the tools are not going to go away. The world is becoming so digital that it's hard pressed to eliminate that. We might delay it, we might put it in different contexts, but it's important for us to be able to define it, and I think that's our challenge.
So if I just may briefly, the report was thorough, and I appreciated the opportunity to read it, and I think that there was a lot of important information for us to take on. You know, if I understood it correctly, so the three sort of main recommendations, and I think that what I took away from the report was that there are kind of big picture recommendations that are going to fit into planning processes and that are going to fit into work that's underway. I also saw a lot of low-hanging fruit in there of things that we could probably do right away that would be some wins for the school and for families. So if I understood it correctly, the recommendations would be that we need a plan to really sort of put some meat on the bones of what our vision is and what you were talking about, Chris. Yep. And then there's this issue of scope and sequencing, which is there isn't a ton of differentiation right now in terms of what's given to kids, whether they're in first grade versus fourth or fifth grade, and that's created some friction and some issues as well. And then the third is, you know, so great that we have such an engaged community that was participating in the surveys, but there's really an opportunity for us to both make the community a part of our planning process. Yep. And in doing so, to improve our communication with regard to what it is that we're doing, what the expectations are, so that there could be more of that school-family partnership with regard to technology. Yep. As we do that planning, so I would love to hear about the process of the planning and how we're planning to incorporate all of the various voices, whether that's teachers across the different levels and whether that's parents and even students, you know, to participate in that. So I think that's one important piece that I think we should definitely not lose. And then I think it would be amiss. I know that the scope of this is really technology for learning, and so the devices and the applications that we provide students for learning. But if we're going to look at the whole student, I think we can't ignore the fact that they have their own devices, and so technology is a part of their life holistically. And so it's an opportunity that I think would be missed if in the planning process we didn't also take an opportunity to think about where are our policies right now with regard to personal use in school? Do they feel that they're still adequate? Is there an opportunity to sort of, and how do these things interact, right? Yeah. How do personal versus school, you know, a lot of the schools laptops and iPads are used for personal, you know, during personal time. And so how do we kind of look at this holistically and not sort of create a wall where really there isn't one between how kids are interacting with technology? That's sort of the big picture things that came to mind for me. But I also think there's so much in there that we could just run with that would be huge wins. Like, you know, just teachers were talking about some of the issues that they have with blocking, like maybe that's something that could be quickly fixed. A lot of parent frustration around certain games like Geometry Dash, like maybe that's something that could be quickly fixed. So I'd love to hear about like, what can we do? Because the report is so rich and so helpful, both in the long term, but also there are short-term things. So I'd love to see and understand more both the big picture, but also the near-term steps that we can take.
And well, can I just, I think just for, let's just, if you want to finish the slides, I think that would be super helpful.
I felt like we were.
Yeah, no, I know. But I think if you can finish the slides, and I think ultimately, like, we're going to have a plan, like, this is background for us to create our technology plan,
right,
which will include the things that you're talking about.
Right, I think defining the process of, like, who's going to create that plan is an important part.
Right, yeah. So, well, I mean, I think we've talked probably about a few things that are in your slides, but maybe let's.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I thank you for reading the report, and you basically said that what I would say for the next the rest of the slides. So we're good. I you know, and I love low-hanging fruit as much as the next person. So you know, I wouldn't want to deny you your fruit. You got to get rid of Geometry Dash. It's a game. Parents are quite upset by it. I think we don't use the term low-hanging fruit in the report, but I think we pretty much make it clear that that is something that should be reined in. Okay. Now, it does tie back to a bigger picture. And I think that, I never want to forget about the bigger picture. Why is it that something like that is being used? Nobody's evil here. What it is it's something that people have. It fills a need. It looks like something that would be useful. If it weren't as being used as rampantly as it is being used by some people right now, it probably would fit a need. But it's something that is happening because it's filling a void. And that void is the vision and the broader understanding of what the value of these various tools are. So I would not, I know this isn't what you're suggesting or anybody is suggesting, but I wouldn't go after an individual teacher and say, oh, you're doing something bad. I just think that they need to have other tools and they need to have broader understanding. And that's the thing that really needs to happen here in terms of professional development and training and planning and so on and so forth. So just to kind of pop through the rest of these, it's pretty quick now. You're right. We think that the main thing is that there needs to be a vision for technology's role in teaching and learning. That has to be something that's ultimately, vision, is built, then supports or drives a framework for expectations for teachers as well as students. And that's all of that stuff that you were just talking about, the skills, the policies, the curriculum linkages by grade and subject, that's the mapping. But I also, there's a cultural aspect of this too. And, it's not my job to tell you what you have to do or change about that. But, every district is different. I know this district because, like I said, I've been coming here for a real long time. There are certain things that are constants here. One is that you have an environment where there's a lot of autonomy and independence. And, I think that we have different things happening in different buildings. We have a different tone as far as how technology is being used, how support staff are being used, so on and so forth. I think that getting some more uniformity around that will be important. How that happens without actually, unduly dampening the spirit that makes Katona-Lewisboro a unique and wonderful place is tricky.
Maybe I just take a tack on this one or jive a little bit.
Yeah.
What you described there is exactly part of our work behind ourselves as a professional learning community. And the idea about, even today, we had a little bit of a learning experience yesterday for some of our teachers and some of our administrators, and this differentiation between the idea about maybe we're cooperating on some work and we're doing a little basic coordination, and then really truly getting to a spot of where we are collaborating together. So from classroom to classroom and then building to building, and to do that, we need to come together, have those conversations about what those standards we're looking at, about the learnings from each other. And so that structure right now really is not intended to frankly take away from the autonomy of our classroom teachers' amazingness. The hope is we can bring that together, leverage that for more, and then they'll create a guaranteed and viable curriculum across all of our schools and in all of our classrooms. So the structure that we're looking at will certainly support what Jeff and the team have identified. So that is kind of work that has started. And it is this idea about coming together and not just coordinating work, but truly collaborating that. So as the team was talking before, 3rd grade to 4th grade, we need to have those structured, specific conversations. 5th grade to the middle school, those conversations. We need to afford our teams the structure and the opportunity to come together. And that is a piece where, again, professional learning, you'll talk here on this topic. We'll talk about best literacy practices. We'll talk about best instructional practices, SEL, all of those things. The classroom today, in my opinion, is more sophisticated and more demanding upon our educators than has ever been. Mm-hmm. And so to do that, we are still, though, looking at a very minimal amount of time to work with our teachers to work on their learning. And so one of the things I've talked about the board before as well is how can we perhaps afford our teachers a little bit more time to do some of this work and do it in a collaborative fashion. So hearing this, and I hope you heard some of our conversations before, is we are well aligned to bring this right into our current thinking. So these are not standing apart. Quite frankly, they're really complementary of each other. Here's kind of the process that we're talking about, and then how do we bring that to some of those, again, guaranteed viable experiences for our kids. We owe this to our teachers so then they can help the children. So thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing challenge. I mean, as you're talking, I am reminded of the very first work that we did here 24 years ago, which in the first cycle there, which was a year or two, basically resulted in something, and there may be some teachers around who remembered this. There was something developed called the KLSD, and I don't even remember exactly what that was short for besides Katona Lewisboro something, but it was it was a tool that was designed to engage teachers around collaborating on developing curriculum units and classroom activities that integrated technology in a meaningful kind of way. Okay, because the understanding even then was that you were going to need to have curriculum-based activities that brought this technology in so that it could be something more than, oh, we're just going to learn how to type, or oh, we're just going to learn how to format a floppy disk or something like that. But that if you were going to do this, you were going to have to use it in a way that built upon instructional goals. So it was a tool that was designed to get teachers to collaborate in grade level bands, I think, across buildings to do that. Now, different times, different ages. I'm not suggesting that we go back to the KLSD. I probably don't have the word processing program anymore that would open it up. But the idea of collaborating, and nowadays we would do this in terms of PLCs and such, is right on target. You need to keep doing that kind of thing. And I think that's pretty much, we've talked about the recommendations, we talked about the findings. My last page here is just about that there is a full report that talks more about this. I'm sure you'll engage with that as you go further into your planning process and such. And we're always happy to help you through whatever way we can to navigate some of these processes.
So I want to thank Jeff for his comprehensive observation process, and the report, as you all have read, it gives us a lot to think about. But let's continue to dialogue. I think the challenges that we have, I think everyone's going through these challenges. I don't think it's unique to our school district. But as much as technical challenges can be challenging, I think this is going to take a lot more work. I think there's a lot of great conversations we need to have, and like I said, I started the conversation with the appreciation to have these forums, because I think it's important to hear your perspectives and where we want to build the technology. But note that we're also listening to other stakeholders. I was at KES last night, had a chance to meet with some parents at the PTO meeting, and we'll continue to kind of bring in more voices as we do the good work of planning. The actual planning process we mentioned was delayed, so we won't actually start the actual planning process until the state gives us some better guidance in the spring. So in the meantime, we can certainly highlight some things from this to kind of maybe do some first steps, but the long-term piece, I think, will kind of challenge us to kind of think about where we want to be in a few years. And I think we've got the right, we've got a lot of smart people in the room, right? So I know we'll get there. So.
Great.
Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, other questions?
I was going to ask one question. I had a hard time understanding how typical some of our opportunities are. So I really appreciate the history that you provided at the beginning of our conversation. And it seems to me, as you just said, so I appreciate that you sort of brought us back to this observation that this can't be unique to Katona Lewisboro, right? So many districts in the region accelerated their efforts to create a one-to-one environment where previously that might not even have been a thought. It might not even have seemed aligned to the community's values, frankly, in many districts. Nevertheless, as you observe, we're all there now. So I am wondering if you can just answer the question with respect to, since you're working in so many other districts, how typical or how aligned are our opportunities to the opportunities and challenges that you're seeing in other school districts? You mentioned, for example, even with respect to the survey response rate, I appreciated hearing you say that that was great, because I didn't know relative to what another district or even what our response rate was. So if you can just provide some context for us, because you're working in so many other districts, I would appreciate that.
Everybody is having these concerns. I mean, once again, without rehashing the entire thing, people went out during the pandemic and everybody came back with a computer. Most districts did not take those computers away at that point and say, okay, well, we're going to put them back on the carts and we're going to do whatever, take them out of your hands. But the kids then started having them and carrying them around everywhere. This has created the same kinds of issues and concerns in pretty much every district, okay? Two additional things to say about that. One is that you do have a very engaged community, okay? So particularly at the time that we were here gathering this data, there had been parent forums, there had been, conversations about screen time and attention spans and those kinds of things. I work in a number of districts where nobody would have heard those news stories or read that book or, had any of those conversations. So they were like, yeah, they got computers now. Great. Hope they don't drop them. Your parents, you have voices within your community that were like, hey, wait a second, what's going on here? Let's think about this thing. So it probably seems in some cases like, it's a bigger problem here. The situation is the same. It's just the reaction to some extent. And I think in this case, the reaction is good. It's people are asking questions. People want to know. People want to hear things. It's not that people hate technology. There may be some people who hate technology, but that's not the main point. All right, but they're questioning. Okay. The other thing, which then brings us right back to what we've been talking about, is when people have questions, you need to bring them together and have them talk about it. And also, your job as educators, I will say, is to provide guidance. Okay? The average parent, nobody wants to hear this, but they're not educators professionally. They're professional other things, and that's terrific. Okay? But they don't work within the constructs that educators work in terms of curriculum, in terms of the same kinds of structures, okay? So they need to hear from you what it is that is the value of this, and to know that you've thought this through and haven't just sort of, said, oh, everybody's got a computer now, great. But that you can provide, and that's the thing that was top on the previous slide, the vision. Okay, that's your responsibility, and that's the point of this planning process.
Not to get into a major conversation about this,
There you go.
but the AI wave,
Yes.
do we have a policy or a game plan? It could be a yes or no answer.
We had a group of teachers that worked this summer with a consultant that surfaced a lot of structures that are being applied throughout the faculty base. We haven't gotten to a point of developing a policy, only from the standpoint that we are still trying to understand it. So to build a policy and react to where the current stage is, I don't want to say it's premature, but we just may not know what it's evolving into enough to build a structured policy around it. So
And it's moving so quickly.
And it's moving very quickly, right?
It's trying to catch up with it.
Right. So we had almost 20 educators last year try a variety of different tools and products at different grade levels. We did a lot of research on it, applied it in some different settings. We found what works well. We found some things that don't work well. And then they all met this summer and made recommendations and handbooks. Had some conversations with the principals in terms of how we can have more of a consistent message around it. But even since the summer, there's been so many iterations of changes with that AI that we're still trying to grasp, the full context of it. So
We have no student
it's,
policies regarding AI.
we have practices, yeah. So if I may, maybe just for context, maybe give some examples. So our high school English department had many of those members on there. So they are encouraging the conversation around AI, the role it plays in the writing process, the way that they can leverage those tools for creative writing and being able to get feedback through an AI process. So we're starting to leverage the reasons why we have AI and giving context in ways that we can understand how that can improve the learning environment. Right. In the same light, we're creating structures that when needed, we can lock down the browsers in such a way that if they need to write on demand, either for an assignment or an assessment or those types of things, that we can manage the learning environment in such a way that we can put restrictions or guardrails on it in such a way that we get more authentic feedback in terms of doing it. So I don't know if that's a policy yet, but those are the practices that we're putting in place in the classrooms in such a way that we're learning and adapting as it grows.
Great.
So, yeah.
And just to provide the bigger context on that one outside of this district, I mean, every district is struggling with this right now. It is the topic among people who do what Chris does professionally. It is probably one of the major topics that teachers everywhere are talking about. It is a fast-moving train, though.
Yeah.
And
the complexity, it's not a separate tool. It's being embedded in the tools. So it's hard to differentiate. It's kind of like the debate on spell check, right? So it's at one point in time we could manage spell check, but it's just built into the program. Right? So the AI plays that same kind of contextual piece for teachers. But they're creative, and we're having conversations, and we're putting safe environments in front of the kids to be able to explore at the same time, getting the products that are more authentic.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you very
Chair.
much.
Sure. Thank you.
This is
Thank you,
great,
gentlemen.
great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.
We're moving on to item 9.0, public forum. So for those of you who have not been at board meetings before, public forum is an opportunity for us to listen to the community and hear what you are here to talk to us about. We don't engage back and forth during public forum, so if you ask questions, we're not going to answer them. We do reflect on what we hear and try to reflect on it in meetings that follow from when you speak. We encourage you to speak for no more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the max. We have a visual timer that Kim has over on her desk. It will be green on that timer until 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's yellow for the last 30 seconds, and it will beep when you're at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, just to let you know you only have 30 seconds left. And at 3 minutes, the light will turn red and it will beep. And we do encourage you. We have 9 people signed up to speak, so 3 minutes becomes half an hour if you're all speaking. So we do want to hear from everyone. So please, if you can respect the 3-minute limit, we would appreciate it. And I will also do my best to pronounce everyone's name properly. And I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. So Kristen Wickham Baginski. And if you can just introduce yourself and let us know if you have where your kids are in the district, that would be great.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Wickham Baginski, and I'm the parent of a student at Increase Miller. On April 16th, 2007, I was a freshman at Virginia Tech walking to my early morning biology lab. As the sound of gunshots rang out, law enforcement yelled for students outside to run. A group of us ran across a large drill field and locked ourselves inside the dorms. 32 students and teachers were killed in their classrooms that morning, including a close friend of mine. My resident advisor had to jump out of his classroom window as his teacher barricaded the door. Many others were seriously injured, and all of us were traumatized and forever changed. The safety of our children in school is a paramount concern. The necessity of robust school safety measures cannot be overstated, as they protect the physical and emotional well-being of students and staff alike. As we look to the future, the role of school resource officers will evolve, adapting to new challenges and ensuring that their presence remains a cornerstone of school safety. By working together and investing in comprehensive safety measures, we can ensure that our schools remain places of learning, growth, and security for our children. My ask is that the board be open to a discussion around a dedicated school resource officer and any other measures to keep our children and school staff safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Aceta.
Hello, I'm Barbara Aceta. I am an Increase Miller mom. I was at the last meeting wherein I also requested a dedicated SRO for Increase Miller, so I'm just here tonight with the same ask. And I'm just hopeful that you, the board, as fellow parents and fellow advocates for our children and our students, will take this request to heart and into deep consideration and acknowledge this request with a response in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Agnes Petroselli.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Agnes Petrocelli. I have 2 children at Increase Miller, and I am here to formally request a full-time SRO for Increase Miller Elementary School. About a few weeks ago, our schools were in a lockout, during which a man who had just shot 3 people, 2 of them minors, was on the loose about 25 minutes away from our school. While I don't believe the school was in danger at the time, the incident highlighted the lack of dedicated police presence at Increase Miller. I truly believe we're playing Russian roulette with our children's lives in this situation. And I guess my question is, which one of our schools was lucky enough to get our shared SRO that day? Yorktown School has 7 SROs, 1 for each school. Brewster has 4, 1 for each school. PQ Elementary in North Salem received a full-time SRO in 2023, in addition to a second SRO stationed at its middle school and high school. Somers has 2 campuses consisting of 4 schools, and they each have an SRO. In fact, Somers has bulletproof glass windows on its entire first floor. And yet, Cantona-Ullsboro only has 1 SRO covering 5 schools, 2 schools which are about 20 minutes away from each other. Why don't we have a full-time SRO at Increase Miller, especially considering an SRO is welcomed on our campus? Our children have the right to the safest environment possible while receiving an education, and our teachers have the right to the safest environment possible while providing that education. I truly believe there's no good excuse enough to justify the lack of a dedicated SRO for each one of our schools. It's time for Cantona-Lewisboro to figure out how to give its own schools their own full-time SRO and provide that safety to our students and make it its biggest priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Stepanachik? Sick?
Thank you and good evening to the board for providing us the time and forum tonight. I'm here to speak in favor of a dedicated SRO at Increase Miller Elementary School. I was here a couple of weeks ago supporting the same cause, and I'm happy to see more faces this evening joining in. I'm confident that this trend will continue. I'm a father of a first grader at IMES, and next year my middle child will be starting kindergarten. IMES states that their vision is to create an inclusive, collaborative, and welcoming community of learners who experience a kind, responsible, and safe environment. Without a dedicated SRO at IMES, we have to call into question the level of responsibility of those that we as parents depend on to keep our children safe. Before we bring our children home from the hospital, we are baby-proofing everything, from locks on kitchen cabinets to outlet covers. We feed them the healthiest and safest foods. When a manufacturer issues a safety recall on a product, we act accordingly. When learning to ride a bike or participating in sports, we make sure that we provide them with the safest equipment. We make sure that we are shuttling them around in the safest cars we can own. And when they are learning to drive, we provide them the same. However, if we aren't providing the safest learning environment to them, I have to ask, what's it all for? What was the point? I'll conclude by bringing it back to IMES's vision statement and say that we either need a dedicated SRO or a new statement.
Thank you. Olga Limniadis.
Hi, I'm Olga Limniadis. I have 3 kids at Increase Miller currently, one going in 2026. Dear Board, the current SRO effort is emotional and it can become a slippery slope. Why not an SRO at every school in the district? We as parents at Increase Miller are asking you, the board, to consider the issue of an SRO. Barbara, Katie, and Lindsay brought to you the why at our last meeting. And I did some research to assist them. I found the Safe Schools Against Violence in Education, the SAVE legislation laws of 2000 and the 2019 New York State School Violence Active Shooter Resource Guide. There that states that school safety plans can include prevention and facility protection, which means that the school can conduct a facility risk assessment for any security gaps. I would like to ask if you could please provide us with the parents with that assessment. And if you have any subsequent plans from that assessment to fix any of the security gaps. And the district's current SRO's logbook, especially for October 29th, the day of the lockouts due to a shooter. Thank you all.
Thank you. Lindsay Curtin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Curtin. I'm the parent of 2 children at Increase Miller. I just have a couple more points to add in favor of a dedicated school resource officer at our schools. Our district's expansive geographic footprint makes it challenging for local law enforcement to respond quickly in emergencies, underscoring the critical need for a dedicated SRO to ensure the safety and security of all 5 schools. Having an SRO on site fosters a proactive approach to school safety, allowing for the development of strong relationships with students, staff, and families while addressing concerns before they escalate. An SRO serves not only as a first responder, but as a mentor and an educator, helping to create a positive and secure environment that promotes learning and well-being. By investing in a dedicated SRO, our district demonstrates a firm commitment to the safety of our children, staff, and ensuring that every school has a trusted and immediate presence to handle emergencies effectively. And if it comes down to a budget issue, the town of Lewisboro has approximately 6,000 households that pay property taxes. If the entire cost for an SRO needs to be added to the school budget, we're talking about $83 per year increase per household. This is less than $7 a month. And I think that our children and our school staff safety is worth more than a coffee at Starbucks. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle Burston.
Hi, thank you for having us. My name's Danielle Burstein. I have 3 kids who are about to pass through the system at IME. I have a 1st grade boy, I have a kindergarten girl, and I have a 1.5-year-old. He'll be entering the school district eventually. I do want to request a full-time SRO at our schools. Neighboring schools have them. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't. From what I hear, it is built into the budget. And I don't think we need to hear any more firsthand experience stories like Kristen has. I think something hit home for all parents, even parents who have no experience, with any of these school shootings or have friends or family who went through it. But we all got the notification that our children were locked down. All of our hearts as mothers, fathers, grandparents, friends, family, sank. We didn't really know what was going on. I have an infant at home, a 1.5-year-old, so I wasn't really comprised of what was going on during the morning. But when I got that message, I thought school shootings. That is insane. I moved here 2 years ago because of the safety of the school district. I was willing to pay anything at the end of a peak market in the real estate economy to get my kids into a safe school. So hearing that 2 years after my decision to move here really shook me up. I think it's important. I think it needs to be a priority. Parents are worried about things like technology and other things that we discussed regularly at schools. But since 2007, when Kristen went through that experience, you know, school shootings have skyrocketed. It was here, it's now way up here. Everybody knows that. So I think we really need this to be a priority. It needs to be part of the conversation. And we have so many parents who are interested in the same thing with the same requests. They're not here today, but they're all texting us and we're all talking. So we're trying to be here to table this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie Restrepo.
Hello, good evening. Good to be here again. My name is Angie Restrepo, and I'm the mom of a kindergartner and fourth grader at Increase Miller. I feel very strong about the perspectives shared by all the parents here today. I especially feel it now in the environment that we live in, a very decisive world and country. And while I could go on about what would be the policies that I would want to be enforced in front of our politicians, I think this is the approach that I have control over. And so this is why I'm here today, to be able to speak with you. I think as someone who grew up having a SRO while attending school in Jackson Heights, Queens, I remember them being one of the most memorable people in my school. They foster positive relationships between the students, staff, and made law enforcement less scary for all of us. By being consistent present in the school, they became approachable figures who I felt comfortable and trusted to share concerns with, which as a result obviously created a safer and more supportive environment. I think our teachers have a lot on their plate: educate, nurture, keep up with technology trends, and while safety will always be one of their responsibilities in the classroom, they shouldn't be a catch-all. Just like we have a school nurse, a school psychologist, why can't we provide them with a dedicated SRO to help them in moments where the safety of our kids might be at stake? They're really trained to handle various type of crisis, including those involved in mental health crisis, family problems, personal challenges. My 5-year-old knows her IMS values is kind, responsible, and safe. And I would really like to put our money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Thank you. Ingrid Ramos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ingrid Ramos, and I'm a parent at of a student at Increase Miller Elementary School. It's nice to see so many other families here from Increase Miller talking about a very important issue, safety. I'm actually here today to talk about something else. Just wanted to express my support for the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging initiatives throughout the district and in all of the buildings, whether they're administration-led or student-led, or supported by the families. I really think belonging is an important issue in our district, and simply wanted to come here and say that I support it and I'm grateful for it, and I see the impact on a lot of the families and the community throughout our district. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that everyone's spoken who's here, so I'm going to close public comment, and thank you all very much for coming here to share your interest with us about the SRO. And again, we certainly are listening, and we'll have some conversations about it going forward. So thank you. I'm going to move to item 10.0, which is the consent agenda. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Oh, well, hold on, we have to, no,
No, that was last week.
What?
There's a field trip, I didn't know.
Field trip?
I don't think you would need to, is it just a field trip? Yeah. I think you're good.
Oh, good, okay.
In every way I mean that too. It's a good question, but I think we're fine, yeah.
Okay, good. Now I know what you're talking about.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Troublemaker.
Moved by Marjorie, seconded by Rory. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 7-0. I'm sorry that they didn't stay, but, so we are at item 15, which is board dialogue and discussion. I know that there were some people at the last meeting requesting the SRO. Certainly think that, we can talk about it, or I can default to the administration to bring us whatever your recommendation is during budget season.
Is there a way
I
that we
think
can get some actual data around the
There's a-
effectiveness of an SRO at stopping school shootings in schools, and around the likelihood of any given student being shot in any given school? It seems infinitesimally small to me, the likelihood. It's like 1 in 600 million that a child will be shot in a school. And the likelihood of an SRO actually preventing that, in fact, any evidence that I've read suggests that the likelihood, the number of deaths in a building where there is an armed guard increases threefold over where there is nobody who's armed in that building. So I'd love to get some real data. I don't know if this is valid data or this is not valid data, but I think we should do some analysis around how likelihood is it for a student to be involved in a school shooting, or a school to be involved in a school shooting? What's the benefit of an SRO? Do they help? Do they hurt? This is all sort of hearsay, and I'd love to get some evidence-based data that we can say, hey, you know what, there is an argument here, or there isn't.
I think it's important that this is a very emotional and scary.
No doubt, no doubt.
So I think that it's important when people have strong emotions about something that we are empathetic to those feelings. And then
No doubt, but
I
we
think
also
there's an
need
opportunity
data.
to share data. There's a lot of data actually that doesn't support that an SRO actually creates a safer environment. What you're saying is pretty well demonstrated in the data. And so I think that there is an opportunity to share that data with the community so that they understand that a decision to not, or, again, I'm going to look to the administration, that the data demonstrates that it actually doesn't create more safety. And
Well, like all things
I
we
think-
do, it should be data-driven,
yes,
right?
correct,
And-
right,
and
yes.
I don't know whether it supports it or it doesn't support it, but we should get the data, and then
Right,
we can make an
but the
educated
data,
decision,
right,
right?
but the data does show that the data doesn't support that an SRO makes a school safer. And I think we have a tremendous focus on mental health of our students and have invested heavily in the presence of programs that support our students. And when we compare to other districts in terms of our number of psychologists in our district, we've made a real investment in the wellness and mental health of our students, which I think is a real opportunity to prevent school violence, both, day-to-day school violence. I think our work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging prevents school violence. So there are things we are doing that prevent school violence. And then there's things that I think people perceive will protect their children. And I think we can, ask that if it continues to come up, that the administration provides some of that feedback around, whether or not it actually is protective or not. And the data shows that it's not that protective.
I'm sure you can find data on either sides of the argument.
I actually went on a whole rabbit hole after last week, just trying to educate myself because I had exactly the same question. And at the same time, I also empathize with the parents because I too, every time there's a new shooting, I put myself in those parents' shoes and I go through the vast amount of sadness and frankly, rage. I imagine the kind of rage I would feel if that were to happen to one of my children. And And I went to look, and you're absolutely right. I was looking at Sandy Hook Promise and some of the things that they have, the information that they have in terms of evidence-based on what works. And it all points to, being able to identify, because most of the time these are either current or former students. And so being able to identify kids in distress, to work on things like social isolation, to work on things like, are kids going through a tough time at home or in their life in general? So you're 100% correct. And I was able to find a study that was in the Journal of American Medical Association in 2021, and it was funded by the Department of Justice around this issue. And the study was titled Presence of Armed School Officers and Fatal and Non-Fatal Gunshot Injuries During Mass Shootings from 1980 to 2019. And the conclusion was data suggests no association between having an armed officer and deterrence of violence in these cases. An armed officer on the scene was the #1 factor associated with increased casualties after perpetrators' use of assault rifles and machine guns. And then it says, prior research suggests that many school shooters are actively suicidal, so intending to die in the act, and so an armed officer may be an incentive rather than a deterrent. And then it goes on to talk about the various things related to mental health and all of that. But I think that this is one study, and I think that we can always look at more, but completely 100% understand where parents are coming from. And looking at a police officer gives you that feeling of security, right? And I think it's natural that they're thinking, and it's good for us to have an SRO program for a number of different reasons, that law enforcement relationship, the sort of kids learning about all of that. But this is a tough one, but yeah.
So I also think an important part of the conversation, we are currently investing a large amount of money in new security vestibules for our schools. And that's going to provide, I think, a lot more than we have. And we have some amazing greeters that have either police backgrounds or military backgrounds that are at the front line and would do anything to protect our children. So I think, I don't know if that's a known entity out there, but I think that we are doing and putting our best foot forward. We may not have somebody that looks, like they're armed, but we've got a lot of things in place and are putting a lot of things in place to protect our children.
Yeah, I want to echo that, Lorraine, sorry. I don't know how well known it is that those individuals do have the backgrounds and would be kind of the point person in case there was something like that, albeit not armed, which the data shows doesn't help at all. But I think maybe more front-facing with that, so people understand who these individuals are, not only brings it a tighter community, but gives more faith in that process.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that within our security contract, you can choose different tiers of background, and we specifically choose that all of our greeters have either military or police background. So, and people may not be aware of that. So again, I think we should look to the administration to provide us with whatever information we need.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. What you spoke about tonight is exactly what you will find, though, is a mixed perspective on that, and even where you lean into the idea about supporting strong mental health services, absolutely as a key piece. Actually, some conversation about restorative practices, which the district has significantly invested in, to again have those conversations in our schools, within not just the schools, like once in a while, it's like in our classrooms consistently. So the investment of restorative practices has certainly been identified in there. And so you will definitely find that combination of those pieces. And so what the district is doing now is certainly very well aligned with what the researchers say are other opportunities that we should be exploring to keep all kids and faculty, as safe as possible. And I think you described it very well, Barbara, that yes, who doesn't want to feel as safe and possibly secure you can, and then realizing then again, unfortunately, that the researchers say that most often that, and we've seen when even SROs are on site and things like that, if anything, if something happens to that level, it's more about a containment piece than a 100% absolute preventative part. So we can certainly look at some things. You already found some research out there from obviously a highly credible piece there. That is in general what you will find is it really does come up I would suggest with a very local decision making, and where the energy is there from the community. And one of the speakers today mentioned a district I spent some time in that happened to be a piece that for that particular community at that particular time was something that was their decision. And that was a piece that was forwarded. It really was not one piece to the other. There's timing, obviously, that took place, other things across the nation and stuff. So it really is that much of I would believe, again, a localized control component that we would say, does that make sense for us here? And again, I do want to reiterate the things the district has put in place, things like, the restorative practice. Oh, that doesn't, actually, that's exactly what we want to be doing at a consistent classroom basis level. So I think you spoke to, again, Barbara, most often it comes from within the piece there. So making sure there's mental wellness supports are in place, our school psychologists, our counselors, and all those components, with classroom teachers delivering these conversations about when conflict does take place, let's talk about how we address and support that. So I commend the district for the strength that we have there, without a doubt.
Is this a story we need to put out there with all these different components, that the security vestibules, the military backgrounds, the restorative practices, all the things that we are doing?
The state requirements to have planning and teams identified.
Is that something we put a storyline together and push it out, or do we not do that?
I don't know if there's a right or wrong piece to it. I do believe that in general, most of our community that I'm aware of see those elements. And then even, the team here, we partnership with our B&W BOCES team with our training. We have building-based committees that meet throughout the year. We have district-wide, state security committees. We have the appropriate identified drills and procedures that we need to go through. And that was kind of what our one speaker mentioned about the legislation from the state that requires those things. And so those are all in place. And, it wasn't that long ago that it really didn't exist. And it really truly does now. And so even things like some of the training that we need to provide to some of our teachers along the way, and some of those abilities that we
There's so many things. I mean, you could push that out to the PTOs, or however we want to get that information out. They're thinking we're, maybe doing nothing, when in reality, there's a lot of things going on.
Have we had a parent council meeting when this has come up yet? No, so I think there's an opportunity to see whether this kind of bubbles up into the parent council, and then they can have a conversation about it there, and we'll see.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of sort of pushing it to the community, but I think we need to be cautious about
security planning,
about the broader media, and trying to express that either we're weak or we're strong in security and safety in our schools. I don't think that's something we want to put out into the ether.
Yeah, I think we should, we can address it
threat.
through parent council. I think parent council is a good place to start. And I think, to sort of, let's see if we need to do anything.
And when John and I have the next one, we can
Yeah.
certainly bring that up and have that conversation without a doubt.
Great.
One thing people might not know about the security vestibules is that they're actually, from a design perspective, if you go to embassies, if you go to other buildings that are considered to be targets for security incidents, you're going to find security vestibules. So that's actually a huge thing, that we're able to put those in every school. And I don't think people realize how much of a big deal the security vestibule actually is.
Very much so.
Great. Thank you. Future meetings?
I have
Oh, yeah,
one
I'm sorry.
other
Yeah,
question for board dialogue. Just when I looked out at the calendar, you're going to future meetings. If I'm not mistaken, we're not meeting again until mid-December. And I just wondered, because we haven't really been talking about it, but I know there was an article in LoHUD, and it's a regional conversation, as I understand it, around regionalization. And I'm just wondering, are we filling out a survey and submitting, and that would need to happen between now and the next board meeting? I didn't know. I thought it was supposed to be December 6th, and so it's probably not something the board needs to see, but could you just
certainly, yes.
provide reassurance that that's happening?
So some folks around may recall the same term, regionalization, coming back in New York State a while ago. And the intent at that point in time was significantly different from what it is now. The general piece that the understanding is, how can we across the regions leverage the resources that we have to connect and work together? From my perspective, my colleagues' perspective, that in particular in the region where we live with our partnership with PNW BOCES, we do that very well. And so there is a state requirement piece that's going to cross the state of a whole plethora of information that we're pulling together, and our team is doing that now amongst many other, every school district in the state. So that will go in place. Don't know exactly when and how that report's going to come out, and then what any requirements are going to be with that. So right now, it's really looking at my understanding is the basic intent there is once that's connected and collaborated with, that what would the plan be? And most recently, we even talked about is there opportunity for, once again, and every year is a partnership with PNW BOCES, we do identify themes for each year that we're working on and connecting with. And we've had a little conversation with our group just earlier today. And so the information that's going into the state, to be honest, is a little frustrating because we were asked to complete a rather lengthy document. And thank you to Julie and the team and Lisa there. And we have to go get the data to put into the state report by logging into another state website and getting the data out of that and putting it back in. So to say frustrating, it would be probably a little under data there, but so we're kind of waiting to hear our general understanding as to thinking about across areas of what we can support across school district. We're partnering with possibly another, BOCES up in Ulster County here because they have a particular lane they're looking at. The state already sets it up. We can cross contract with them, so we do those things. So my limited understanding is that may not be happening across a larger state. But where we are now, I know it's our PNW BOCES, but they are well regarded across the state. And so perhaps we can show some models of that. So I don't see really any significant changes. It was disappointing just again to take so much like not like a couple of hours, but I don't even want to estimate. So dozens and dozens of hours. And so, but we are in good stead. We are in a great PNW BOCES. And so once we get some more information out, whenever that report comes back to us or what the requests and asks are for, we'll certainly let the board know. And that was a great question. So thank you very much, Marjorie. Thank you.
For all the time, but it sounds like it's on it.
Thank you, Maureen Jones.
Oh, morning.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Marjorie.
I have a couple of very quick things. I know it's getting late, but I just sort of wanted to get it out there. So this is something that has been on my mind, has been a little bit in the news, and I suspect it's probably in the news of other folks in the community. And I think just from a fiduciary sort of perspective and understanding risk and risk management, we're hearing about what potentially might happen with education at the federal level. And we're very lucky that the percent of our budget that comes from federal funds is actually quite small. So I think that that's, from a risk management perspective, a good thing. And I think just as the board goes into budget season, it might be helpful for us to just really have an understanding of, for example, is it just IDEA funds that we get? Is there anything more? So what is our risk exposure in particular? So for example, we're expecting to receive about $4 million potentially from the Katona geothermal project. And so having an understanding of, what is the earliest possible that we could submit for that? Is there anything that we should be doing now? There's nothing to do, but just in terms of informing the board as we go into budget season, in terms of what that potential risk exposure is so that we're informed. I just wanted to sort of put that out there. I don't know if that's something that's on the minds of others, but I think.
Is that the risk that it's not going to happen? You're saying the risk that it's not going to happen?
I'm hoping that it
Potentially
doesn't
not gonna
happen. Well, we all hope that it doesn't happen. I think just understanding the exposure. So for example, if there were to be a cut or elimination, how big, what does that mean for us in terms of where would that affect us the most? Is there a particular program? And so just in terms of being aware of our risk exposure, there's nothing to do. Hopefully, it's not an issue we ever have to deal with, but I think it's just a matter of, thinking and being informed and sort of being as ahead of the game as we can be in terms of understanding risk exposure. And I'm not saying there's anything to do. It's just a matter of being informed.
Yeah, I certainly think as we go through the process, at any of those meetings, we can have those conversations there. Again, as of yet, we don't have new leadership, so we don't know exactly what that's going to be yet, if there's going to be those level of changes. But it's certainly along those pieces and when those projects come up. We do know that also that just thinking at the state level with, the Rockefeller kind of work that's been going on there, that's a big piece from our state funding that we need to look at. And so we can start maybe breaking that a little bit more. We always talk about the pie, how much is from local, how much is from the state. So we can look at that a little bit more and say the state revenue, a significant portion is then backfilled from the Fed. And so we can talk about that certainly at that point in time when we're looking at that work and anything that comes along the way without a doubt. Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good. The last thing is, I realized last month was.
Before you move on from that.
Sure.
So you talked about geothermal implementation, and maybe there are other projects that we have going on that are dependent on IRA funding.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is that there's a risk, given the,
Let's
I'm
understand
gonna
what
call
that
it
risk is.
bluster, but given the political dialogue, there's a risk that that may go away. Is that what you're saying? And that you would like us to be aware of where any reduction in federal funding might impact the district? Is that your question?
That's correct.
I would support that. I mean, I do think that there's a risk there. It can't be that difficult for us to identify where we're allocating federal funding, like IRAs and such. It probably is.
Yeah, I think it would be fairly straightforward. I just have no idea of what level of risk we're at, but we can say what the dollar amount is and what those numbers.
The exposure in essence is
Absolutely. Yep.
what we're expecting to receive that we might not.
Absolutely.
Simply
Yep.
put.
Yep, absolutely.
And anything that we can move faster along, we probably should.
Right.
Exactly.
The thing being, is there anything we can do to reduce that by getting those things moved along quick? And
Well, I
the
think
answer
we're
may
moving
be.
those things as quickly as we can.
Yes. Right, exactly.
We're not waiting on anything.
Right, right.
So
That's what that's what we're trying to do, is move everything we can along quickly and focus on maybe areas that are more likely maybe to possibly go away, certain whatever projects, but I mean, I can go into specifics, grants, federal flow-through dollars. We don't receive a whole lot of federal flow-through dollars. Our largest grants are our IDA, or special education grants, which I would have a hard time believing that would be cut, maybe, I don't know. But we do, in that area, we receive about $700,000 of supplemental funds for IDA. Title I is maybe $70,000, and Title IIA, which is for PD, is probably about $40,000, and then Title IV is $15,000. So it's not, we don't receive, like I said, the greatest amount is for our special education grants. So.
And then the second piece in there, like you were saying a little bit before about the state funding, that is then relying upon a lot of the federal local kind of, would kind of come back to us as just as former state funding.
Yes, exactly.
So
right.
that's-
So they backfill their budget.
That's the piece there. And then with these other pieces like the IRA for the funds there, and who knows what some of the anticipated support for sustainability projects and solar work and things like that. That's just a piece we're not committed to that fully right now. We'd like to, as we know, go there. There's supposed to be plans, but that'll be the unknown for sure.
Yes, and that is, so that's a direct pay, it's reimbursement after you spend it. So, and we already authorized by the bond to spend those monies. So if that money were to go away, we already have the monies allocated for geothermal. It just would allow for us to do some other projects on the back end. So that project wouldn't go away. It's just, there are additional alternates in our bids that we weren't able to award that we could go back and award if we were to receive those IRA monies. So, and hopefully, like, in that IRA, some of that, the geothermal is actually in IRS regulations, there's a lot of intricacies in what comes from what pot and what's in which legislation, so. Yeah.
But that's helpful reassurance just to know that, that it's not going to affect that project. So that's super helpful.
Yeah.
And I would say, I think beyond knowing what those amounts are and as we said, like moving things along, there's not really, after that, there's really not a lot we can do. We just have to wait it out. So I don't know that there's like any extra work that I would really want the administration to do. I think we know what those things are and
as we go through the different chunks of the budget, as I think We talked about that a little bit as we move forward, just trying to modify kind of our usage of those conversations with the budget. So we've got kind of three heavy pieces that we'll be looking at, and that is at the time we'll be here using our tradition, our typical time here, and really using this as a operating working session. So we're going to try to have those be the topics so we can bring that up when that piece comes forward. And so absolutely, and that'll be a conversation we'll have, sure. So thank you, Lisa, very much.
Last and final thing is, I learned that last month was National Farm to School Month, and that was pretty cool. I saw it in the NYSBA clips that there were a number of activities. I think that there's a first annual Farm to School Summit happening in Syracuse for the state of New York, which is really neat. And a suggestion I wanted to make is, as a new trustee, and I don't know if others would be interested in this as well, definitely not anything urgent, but in the future, I think a talk about school lunch and nutrition would be really interesting to me, and just trying to understand. I know we work through Aramark, but nutrition is such a big part of students' ability to learn and play sports. And I'd love to learn more about our approach to nutrition, our school lunches. For so many kids, they get the majority of their calories and nutrition from school. And so I think that that's a really important issue, and I'd love to learn more about it. And, have we looked into farm to school programs? Do we participate? If not, why not? And just have a more robust understanding of what we do in that space. I'd love to just know more.
I think if there's interest, we can loop back on that maybe in a future board discussion, and then add it into in the future if people are interested.
I vaguely remember we did something on this like 4 or 5 years ago. I remember Aramark, we were considering different vendors. You might have been involved, Lisa, and they did present to us their thinking around student nutrition, and I seem to remember that there was like a presentation around which foods they choose, why they choose them, the nutritional value of the foods that we offer, and so on. I mean, I'm going back a good few years, so.
I'd love to know where our food comes from, like where does the food that we serve students comes from? And I thought it was great when I heard that the high school students were talking about meatless Mondays and how they got that implemented. And so love to hear, student perspectives. And I think it's an important issue, and to the degree that there's interest in the board, I think it'd be something worth having a conversation around.
Every student having lunch in the high school is going to be a great head start.
Right.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move to future meetings. So tomorrow morning, policy committee will be here at 9 a.m.
1.
Oh, at 1 p.m.
Yes.
And then 2 Fridays from now, on December 6th, there'll be a sustainability committee meeting at 8:15 in the district office. Thursday, December 19th, there's our next Board of Education meeting at 7:30 here in the library. And then the next morning, there'll be a policy, morning? Or is it always 1 o'clock now? Okay, next morning, there'll be a policy committee meeting at 9 a.m. And Ray, if you want to close things up?
Yeah, so thanks again for tonight, every board. And again, I will look to your feedback. I appreciated the gentleman sitting here tonight, again, the conversation and the setup and things like that. The only thing that threw me off is Barbara was on my left this time and not on my right. So and then, again, I want to thank you, the leadership, and the kids last week. It was awesome. I mean, it was really great. I've been kind of talking to a lot of people, probably to nauseam, but it's really great to talk to the students. Again, they went through the same piece, but their perspectives on our why and how we want to look at, and what their thoughts are about some of our next steps to continue our being a great school district. So thank you.
Yeah,
thanks again. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Motion by Rory, second by John.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.